Hello everyone, in this video I want to show you guys how I digitize my 35mm analog films. And I've been recently shooting quite a lot of 35mm black and white films and a few of the color 35mm films for my everyday photography shooting pleasure. And with those films piled up, I had the option of either have the lab scanning those films after they finish developing for a added cost, or I have the option of just digitizing those films myself, either by getting a 35mm film scanner, or have the option of using my digital camera and actually digitize them the most efficient way that I deem possible. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you my process, and which I also think is, in my opinion, the most convenient and quickest way to get high quality digitized films. So I'm going to do a few examples and show you guys at the end of the video, actually when I'm trying to process those films in the Lightroom, and show you guys how easy it is to digitize your film once you have everything set up and ready. Okay, so first thing first, the equipment. There really isn't quite a lot of equipment required for digitizing your films using your digital camera. So all you need, or actually the most essential thing you need, is a macro lens. Okay, so preferably a 50mm macro lens would work better, in my opinion, compared to a 90mm or 100mm macro lens, because the adapter that I'm going to be using is actually optimized for a 50mm macro lens. The second is if you're using one of those longer focal length macro lens, you'll need some adapters. This one, it kind of looks funky, but it's required if you want to use a longer focal length macro lens to digitize your film. And a digital camera with a fairly high resolution is preferred. For me, I have my Sony A7 R3, which I think it's a 42 or 43 megapixel digital camera, mirrorless, fantastic camera that I use for my product photography and sometimes for my wedding shoots and engagement shoots. It has been super reliable and it's multi-purpose, and I just absolutely love it. For that purpose, this camera also features a pixel shift option, which gives you a much higher resolution and a much better defined picture, a single shot which combines 4 different pictures to create a super high resolution, super high detailed picture in the final product. For that purpose, it's also great for converting your films if you want a super high resolution conversion from your film to a digital format. And as I said, any other full frame cameras will probably do perfectly fine, or even a APS-C sensor. As long as you have a macro lens, potentially you need an adapter. But the most important thing that I would ask you guys to get if you want to do that is a Nikon ES-2 film digitizer adapter. This adapter is originally designed for the Nikon digital cameras to be used with their 50mm macro lens to digitize those analog films. And again, this one is only used for 35mm films, either color slides or color negatives. Color slides, color negatives, and black and white negatives in 35mm format. I'm just going to quickly show you what you need and what's included in this slide adapter first. So you have a tube to connect the actual adapter, which looks like this, onto your lens. And with this kit, they provide you with a slide adapter, which you can fit 2 slides. And with this kit, you also get a actual slide or negative adapter right here. the negative adapter fits any strips of film in the amount of 6 or less. Now usually if you go to the lab and they cut it for you, you're gonna get a film strip in the like a 4-section film strip. So this one works in here perfectly fine, and you have 2 extra frames. If you're cutting your own slides or films, you can cut in the amount of 6 if you desire, but again, I have labs process my film, so every film comes back in 4, which fits into this slide adapter, this adapter perfectly fine. And that's pretty much what's included in the ES-2. So in the ES-2, you have the actual adapter, the most important part. This adapter in the front is plastic, and in the very front it's a frosted plexiglass. So when you put your slides or your negatives in here, you slide it in from the slot over here, and it kind of stops in place. There's a little clicker in here, so you can, when you finish this one, you put a new slides in here and you slide it over here, and you can put a new slides here and you take it out, or you put it in here, you take this one out, you put a new one in. So it's a fairly quick process, okay? So you can just do this like very quickly if you have a whole bunch of slides. You can do a whole roll of film in probably less than 10 minutes, okay? If you have slides. Now for this purpose, I'm gonna be using negatives. I'm gonna be converting some black and white negatives and a color Actor 100 color negative. So for this one, this is the most important part. This 6-shot negative adapter. It works the exact same way as a slide adapter. You just slide it in here, and you basically just go through your film. And once you finish, you take the film out. You open it up. There's a little slot where you can like push it to open it. Right here. So let me just actually put a film in here so you guys can see. So let's start converting a shot that I've done on my Leica M4 II. Okay, let's just try to use this one. Okay, so this one is slightly short. It's less than 4, but basically all you do is just line up the slots and make sure when you line up, have the glossy side facing up, okay? You don't want the frosted side facing up because that's the wrong side. Okay, so right here, and basically I usually just align the empty space with one of those, let's see if I can actually align it. Usually I do this quite quick, but I don't know what happened today. I'm doing it kind of slow. Let's see. And if you want, you can always, of course, wear a glove. Okay, so that looks about right. And I'm just gonna kind of push it in, make sure it's aligned. Now for me, my actual film is actually kind of messed up at the very beginning on when I loaded the film. So it's not perfectly aligned, but you get the point. So basically you have the film aligned here, and then you're gonna put this into the adapter and then start shooting, okay? So that's a basic concept. It's kind of fairly quick and easy to do, but let me just actually show you how you mount this on the actual camera. Now, again, if you have a different macro lens setup, everything's going to be slightly different, but the concept is going to be very similar. For me, I'm going to be using my Sony and my Sony 90mm macro lens for this purpose, demonstration purpose, okay? So what you also need if you have a Sony 90 is this adapter set. So this adapter set is sold on Amazon. It's basically a lot of small pieces of different kinds of adapters of various sizes. That's for this purpose is used to extend the distance between the actual lens the actual lens and the adapter, because if you go too close, it actually wouldn't be properly, it will not properly focus with a very long focal length macro lens. If you have a 50mm lens, you can probably use, now there are two tubes in the Sony, in the Nikon adapter. You have a shorter tube and you have a long tube. Depending again on your lens setup, you're going to be using this different combination to get a perfect focal distance where your camera can actually focus on the actual slides in here to take a good shot. Okay. So for my purpose, I'm going to start setting up the adapter. So for me, I'm going to be using this long tube, which is a 62mm adapter that came with the slide adapter. I'm going to be putting this onto my lens, which uses a 62mm filter thread. Now be really careful because the thread itself is actually plastic, so you don't really want to use too much force and damage this thread. Otherwise, you'll probably have to get a new one from Nikon, which wouldn't be nice. On the top of this tube that came with adapter is another plastic thread. That's where you're gonna mount this extension tube on there. The extension tube, again, is just a series of different size of adapters that they sell as a kit on Amazon. This one I got is a Kin F concept extension tube set, or adapter step up and step down filter ring adapter set. So this is my perfect distance that I calculated. You have a few more of those adapters, but I wouldn't use those because, again, with the 52mm filter thread required, you kind of have to stop at the front and the back with a 52mm adapter. And again, this thread is 52mm, so I'm going to be putting this one on here. And you'll see this little thread over here. You kind of want to tighten this so the front doesn't rotate around, and then you can kind of just tighten everything together, make sure it's nice and fully secured. And then you can loosen this knob a little bit so the front can be adjusted to the correct angle. Okay, so this is pretty much the setup. Okay, as you can see, the actual distance you need is somewhere here for a 90mm lens. If you have a 50mm lens, you're gonna be using a shorter tube, which is this one, and you're gonna kind of just adjust and try to get a correct distance, whichever way is deemed necessary. With this setup done, next you'll find a suitable light source. Okay, so for the light source, for me, is my video light, which I use to light up the scene. And I'm gonna actually right now switch my camera to the video light and show you guys what it looks like. Alright guys, so this is my basic setup. As you can see, I actually mounted my camera onto my tripod, and this is the original macro lens setup with the original tube with the extension tube as necessary to convert and extend the distance. And this is the final actual piece of the ES-2 adapter. Okay, so with this done, the last step is you want to, again, I'm just gonna do a quick demonstration. All right, so setup's done, and I have a test roll film loaded. So I'm just gonna slide this into the adapter and make sure the glossy side is facing the camera. Okay, so just slide it in. And you're gonna do some initial adjustments in your camera. Now, as you can see, for me, I usually use manual focus, especially for this purpose. I am just gonna try to get a very precise focus and then try not to move it. So right now the focus is all done. As you can see, the slide is not correctly centered. So I'm just gonna rotate it a little bit, try to get the correct angle. And once the angle is correct, and you can also adjust the distance a little bit so it goes in a little bit or goes out a little bit, and try again to focus and get that perfect distance and composition set up. Okay, so let's see. So might have it go out further a little more. Leave some borders for cropping. Let's see, focus again. I mean, you can use automatic focus, but I find that a manual focus for slide adapt is the best way to go. Now, this looks about a pretty good framing. I have some black area in the border, so later on if I need to crop it, I can crop it. And now I want to actually tighten this knob so it doesn't rotate around the actual adapter, and it also doesn't extend or move around like back and forth as well. So everything's locked and ready to go. For the exposure, I usually use manual exposure, and usually it will tell me, in terms of the correct exposure, which aperture I want to use at a ISO setting that's predetermined. I use ISO setting ranging from 200 to 800. I haven't found a significant difference with the higher ISO setting when converting my digital films. But, just play around with actual exposure. Your goal is to get to an exposure within -3 or +3 range. That generally gives you a pretty well exposed or converted digital file that you can play around later on in Lightroom. It says no card, so I gotta putting a new card in there, and we're gonna take a few pictures and try to show you guys what it looks like in the Lightroom as well. All right, so I put in a memory card, and as you can see, I already had some exposed shots in here. Now, my goal when I'm reviewing those shots is try to always just have plenty of information in the center area of the histogram. And as you can see, most of those shots landed somewhere in the center. So now I know this is probably a pretty good base profile later on for Lightroom editing. Okay, and this is what I would usually go for, which is have most of the information in the center. So now we come to this exposure. Let me see if I can bring up the histogram. Nope. All right, and let's see. Focus again. And I'm gonna turn on my pixel shift, which is gonna enhance the actual capturing detail of this shot by quite a lot. Okay, and since this thing doesn't move, so it's perfect for pixel shift. What I also do is I usually enable electronic shutter, so there's no vibration during each shot, and the camera just captures completely quiet. If you have that option, it's probably better to enable that as well. I'm gonna take a test shot, and usually for aperture, I get to at least f4, and my shutter speed, since it's steel, so it doesn't really matter, I can adjust my shutter speed to compensate. So for this shot, I'm gonna have it go at I'm going with what the camera tells me. So now it just took a shot with the pixel shift, and so this shot is done. And we're gonna move to the next shot. So basically you just slide your shots around until you get to the next frame. Pretty fast if you have lots of films mounted. And for this shot, again, exposure seems to be correct. So I'm gonna take another shot for pixel shift. And it's done. So you can see how fast, once you set this up, you can process your negatives. Now, once you have the process kind of established, the workflow is, again, just really, really quick. You set up your film, you slide it in there, and you just start shooting. And sometimes you don't even need to adjust your focus because, again, it's on the same plane. And once I have the focus set, I'm pretty much just keeping note of the overall exposure of the density of the film, and then just adjust as necessary and try to get it to 0. and I'm using pixel shift, so it takes like 4 pictures, and I just go frame by frame, and it's again extremely quick. You can see how fast I'm processing 4 frames. It pretty much doesn't take any time at all. And imagine if this is done on a scanner, you're gonna be miserable. So for me, the best way, again, is just to actually have everything set up properly and digitize the film using a camera compared to a scanner. So I've scanned a few films. Actually, now I'm gonna go downstairs, show you guys how those films look actually on the computer, and we'll start from there.